Everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master. I'm actually here, out here with Chubby Meatball, taking Chubby Meatball for a walk. There's Chubby Meatball. But I'm really would like to talk about my 1.5K. I was in a tournament just this last weekend, made the top 8 with Modern Merfolk in the post-Modern Horizons metagame, and I would like to share how it all turned out. So it was an interesting tournament, but going into it, I have to say that I didn't feel completely prepared. I've been running very poorly online, losing an insane amount of die rolls. I've been recording it just to make sure. And I've been in poor form, so my results are not up to the par that I would like. So I was going into this tournament with a lot less confidence that I would like to. But sometimes when you don't have, you just got to go through with it. You got to go in the tournament anyway, prepared or not. You take your 75 and you go ahead. So if you want to know the deck list that I used to make the top 8 of this tournament, you go check the description below for that. So it was the Fusion 1.5K, hosted by my favorite local game store, Fusion Gaming Online. And so round 1, I was up against humans, and I won the die roll. I was ecstatic. I didn't have a turn 1 play, unfortunately. So I go like island go. My opponent goes like unclaimed territory, naming humans, passes the turn. I'm like, golden, we are in business. This humans player is not going to have a fast start. So I play like turn 2 Silvergill Adept, I draw a card. Turn 2 they play like Land Noble Hierarch. I'm like, oh my god, could this get any better? Can you script it more perfectly? But then there came a problem. I played my 3rd land drop for the turn, and all I had in hand were 2 drops. So I play a Lord. Then next turn my opponent plays like, I can't remember, I think it was like Mantis Rider, smack me for 3. Again, I don't draw my 4th land for the turn, so I play another creature, attack. Then my opponent, on their turn, they have 5 mana, they go like Reflector Mage, bounce your Lord, Phantasmal Image, bounce the other Lord. Now I just got a Silvergill Adept in play. Well, now I'm actually in trouble. I take my turn. I don't really have anything to play because both my different lords were bounced to my hand. I gotta play some other crap. I still do not have the 4th land. Very annoying. And I just play a creature, pass. My opponent plays another 2 creatures, and then basically I lose the game. It was a classic. My humans opponent's playing 2 things a turn. I can only play 1 thing a turn, and I basically get tempoed out and I lose. Game 2 was sort of similar in that regards. My opponent had an Aether Vial, I didn't have an Aether Vial, and I got smashed just as badly. And again, I didn't have a turn 1 play, so I was really tempoed out once we got to like turns 3 and 4. So after round 1, I decide to start surveying the tournament. It's very interesting. There is a lot of Vial decks in the tournament. There's like Spirits, humans, a Merfolk deck, also a lot of Death and Taxes and Eldrazi and Taxes. It actually was a pretty well represented archetype in this event, and maybe it's because people want to start playing with the white cards. The white cards are the cards that are being well positioned. You want to have Rest in Peace, you want to have Stony Silence, you need the good graveyard hate cards to beat the Hogak deck. Just like Chubby Meatball's trying to attack the grass here and all the other bugs. So anyway, I thought that was very interesting. Not too many Hogak decks actually in the metagame. There weren't that many. The thing that was overrepresented were all these Aether Vial decks. There was quite a few Spirits decks and a lot of Death and Taxes decks. Round 2, I do get paired. By the way, it's a 6-round event with about 50 people. And after you lose the first round, you gotta keep a high head. You gotta still be confident. You always have a chance, all right? Until you lose your second game, you always have a chance. And even if you lose, who cares? There's going to be another tournament in the future. So there's always a chance. So I'm super confident. My hopes aren't down just because I lose the first round. And I always find that when I'm in the sort of sudden death bracket, the bracket where if I lose one more time, I'm out of prizing and I'm out of top 8, I seem to almost perform. I wouldn't say I perform better, but I would say my opponents do perform worse. They're the ones who are under more pressure. They're the ones more anxious. So I had that sort of advantage. But round 2, those advantages did not matter because I was up against Eldrazian taxes, and my opponent's hands were just bad. In round 1, they like took something with Tidehallow Sculler, but they were in such a perfect situation to destroy me with Wasteland Strangler, but they never had it, and I overran them with my lords. And in game 2, they kept a hand with 4 lands, 3 creatures, and just drew lands for the rest of the game. Once I knew when my opponent put the 5th land in play and just passed, I knew they were dead. I knew they had nothing else. So I beat Death and Taxes in round 2. Round 3, I was up against Dredge, and my opponent, I had Force of Negation in my hand, and I'm like, I want to save this Force of Negation for something important. My opponent plays turn 1 Shriekhorn. Do I burn this on the Shriekhorn? I decide not to, but maybe I should have. It just so happened that Shriekhorn was the only thing that Dredge player had going for them. They had a weird hand of like Mountain and Steam Vents, and I guess they had some green cards in hand, like Life from the Loam. They just didn't do anything. With this 2 mana in play, all they had was the Shriekhorn. They put a Prized Amalgam in play. They dredged once. They found 1 dredger, and it was a bad dredge, so I got really lucky in game 1. I was able to put the pressure on the battlefield with the lords and attack for the win before my dredge opponent couldn't do anything. They gave me a lot of turns. It was just a really bad hand for the dredge player. One thing that I did do was that they did play Conflagrate for 0, and I Force of Negationed it. So if that thing resolved, the following turn they could Conflagrate my board away, or maybe not necessarily Conflagrate my board away because I would counter it, but they would be able to empty their entire hand, because that's definitely something they would have wanted to do with the Conflagrate. John Meatball, you're getting tangled. You're getting tangled. What's going on here? What's going on here? What do I have to do? Don't run away from me, John Meatball. That's a moment where you could have ran away for freedom. Freedom. Anyway, so game 2. Going in against Dredge, oh my god, I had everything. I got everything, but my opponent helped me a little bit still. I drew 3 Relic of Progenituses and a Grafdigger's Cage in that match. But my opponent did have like a pretty good start with like Bloodghast into Prized Amalgam, but they screwed something up. They forgot their trigger at the end of the turn with Prized Amalgam, so that was a huge gift. I might have been able to probably would have won that thing anyway, but it did make the game a lot easier that a Prized Amalgam didn't hit the board on turn 2. There was a Bloodghast in the graveyard and a Bloodghast in play. My opponent attacked with the Bloodghast, I blocked with a creature, let the Bloodghast die, and then at the end of damage step, I cracked my Relic of Progenitus. Remember, you can interact with your opponent at the end of the end step. At the end of the damage step, cracked it, exiled both Bloodghast and the Prized Amalgam, and basically paved the way to victory for me. My opponent definitely couldn't come back after that. Next turn I play like Grafdigger's Cage, another Relic of Progenitus, took my sweet ass time to win the game, and then that was that. So that was my matchup against Dredge. Round 4, Affinity. That was actually a really cool game. That was a really cool match. My opponent had just a ton of stuff on the board. I had to pivot around all of it very, very carefully. I had a Vial that was slowly taking up, and I had several Master of Waves in hand. I think I had nothing to Force of Negation. I had this Force of Negation in my hand. I had nothing to Force of Negation. But on the pivotal turn of the game, I'm going to swing back for like victory. My opponent has like Arcbound Ravager, Signal Pest, Ornithopter, and an Etched Champion. And on the pivotal turn, my opponent attacks with the Signal Pest, the Etched Champion, and the Ornithopter, and has a million artifacts in play. No, before that they play Springleaf Drum, and I Force a Negation the Springleaf Drum, pitching Springleaf Drum, and I've got Merfolk Trcikster in my hand. So there's 1 less artifact on the battlefield to put on the Arcbound Ravager. My opponent makes an attack, and then after sacrificing 1 thing to the Ravager, I say, I have a response. And I play Merfolk Trcikster, targeting the Arcbound Ravager. Now, with that trigger on the stack, it hasn't resolved yet. There's no counter on this Arcbound Ravager. And now I'm putting my opponent in a situation, you gotta sack everything to your Ravager and then dump it on a creature if you want to if you want to push the maximum damage. But the problem is, after they sacrificed that one artifact, they were 1 damage short. They were 1 damage short. They could not sacrifice enough stuff to the Ravager to kill me. They would have just put me down to 1. So it was a fantastic. I love that victory. And it also had to do with pivoting with because of this Etch Champion play. I had to always keep up a Mutavault to block it. They attacked with Etch Champion. I blocked with the Mutavault. They sacrificed a what's it called? The thing that the artifact that regenerates a creature. Welding Jar. So that was a very interesting game. And in game 2, it was also very interesting, a really close race, but I did have an Hurkyl's Recall in my hand at the beginning of that game, and I bounced all my opponent's stuff. I made a big attack. They re-blurted everything back out, and I just Hurkyl's Recalled everything again. And that was it. That was the end of business. So that was round 4. Round 5, I'm up against Eldrazi Taxes again. I don't have a very good memory of this game, except my opponent definitely had more things to do. I didn't like steamroll them over for nothing. There was actually a match to be played against them. I think I recall, there was a game where I just maybe I locked them out of all their color sources with Spreading Seas, but I honestly don't really remember the match very well. Chubby Meatball, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing, Chubby Meatball? Chubby Meatball likes to go outside. She loves walks. This is a cat that likes taking walks. So, yeah. So I do beat that Eldrazi Taxes player, and then we go to round 6. I'm up against Bloy Control. Now, Bloy Control. Game 1, I lose. And I can't believe how I did it. It was a pretty good attrition war. We were playing with, we each had a bunch of Force of Negations. I got my opponent really low, down to 5 life. There was one pivotal turn though where I have this Aether Vial on 3 and 3 creatures in play. My opponent plays Cleek, targets me. I have a Merrow Reejerey in play, and I'm really scared. Oh my god, my opponent's gonna take this Merrow Reejerey, so I vial it in, putting 4 creatures in play. And I'm like, if they wrath the board, then, it's really a 2-for-1, because they lose the Vendilion Click as well. But maybe that wasn't ideal anyway. I should force my opponent to take the click from me, because I put this Aether Vial up from 2, and it's sort of a waste to lose it. Anyway, I couldn't recover from that Supreme Verdict. It was over. So, from that Supreme Verdict, my opponent was at 5, I ran out of gas, or I ran out of ways of playing at instant speed, and on top of that, my opponents just started playing the Planeswalkers, first Teferi, then Narset, then Jace the Mind Sculptor, then Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and I was like, okay, that's it, I scoop. I've seen enough. I thought I had a chance, because I kept playing Lords every turn. I just main phase them, and my opponent had no removal. They kept bouncing it with all the Teferis and the Jace the Mind Sculptor, so I felt like maybe I had a chance, even though they had a bunch of cards in hand. But anyway, it was all for nothing. Game 2, I thought I was going to lose. I had to mulligan down to a 6-card, 1-land hand, and I'm on the play, of course, and I see an Aether Vial on top of my deck. Well, okay, we're going to keep this Aether Vial. So I play a turn 2 Aether Vial, and eventually my opponent plays Teferi and bounces my Aether Vial back to my hand. I didn't get anything in play because it was so slow. So that was unfortunate. And I'm like, well, I guess that's it. This is the end of the match. Not so. I replay that Aether Vial. My opponent really has nothing to do. Turns out they just keep passing the turn. And eventually I start getting creatures in play. So I really have no idea what was in my opponent's hand. But they just had a Teferi. They put this Teferi in play. They bounced my Aether Vial, kept ticking Teferi up every turn, but really had nothing to do with their mana or anything else. One thing that was critical is that they had 3 Field of Ruins in play over this game, and they were having trouble finding the 3rd blue mana source. And I only had islands in play, so they never got Cryptic Command online. That was very important. And they were so choked on blue mana. Whatever they used blue mana for, basically they couldn't do anything else on their turn, because they only had 2 blue mana sources, even though they had 6 or 7 lands in play. 3 Field of Ruins, 2 blue source, and I guess a bunch of plains. So that's what brought me back in the game. That's what helped me actually win the thing. So I was able to eventually vial in creatures, kill the stupid Teferi, violin more creatures, flash and stuff with Trikster, and that's what helped me win that game. And then in game 3, with very little time left on the clock, we played very quickly, but I just had a good hand. And my opponent did not. I just had a bunch of creatures, good interaction, good clock, and my opponent was just in a situation like, what am I going to do? Play this Planeswalker? I think they played a Planeswalker, I countered, and it was over. So I made the top 8. Even it took a little bit of luck. I think I remember even in game 2, I did something stupid in one of those games against the blue-white control player. Like in our rush, because we were getting low on time and we were still in game 2, and in a rush, my opponent played Detention Sphere, targeted like a Master of the Pearl Trident, and me being the clever person, I thought, I'm going to play a Phantasmal Image, copy my Master of the Pearl Trident to keep my lords diversified, because I had a Lord of Atlantis out. But by doing that, I just let my opponent take 2 creatures at once. In response, Violin, Phantasmal Image. Copy Master of the Pearl Trident. You're already targeting that, and now you get to take all copies of that card? Great. I screwed myself. So, wasn't in good form, I would say, throughout that entire tournament, but I wasn't punished. At that point. But let me tell you, I should have been punished harder, but anyway, I make the top 8. We're not chopping. I have no interest in chopping. There was a few other players, competitive players, that didn't want to chop either. So we're playing in the quarterfinals, and I'm up against Eldrazi and Taxes again. Not any of my opponents in the Swiss. Just different. There were so many Eldrazi and Taxes decks and Death and Taxes decks. There are so many of them. I played against 3 different unique people. In game 1, I win it, but I really screwed up. My opponent has like taps out to play, I don't know, like Eldrazi Displacer or something like that, tapping down their Ghost Quarter, and that's when I want to play Spreading Seas. And I'm thinking, do I hit the colored source? They have a white-black line. Do I hit that? And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to hit that to make sure that my opponent can't play like Tide, Hollow Sculler, or Wasteland Strangler. It was like the one only colored source. But the problem is, if they really need a colored source, they can still sacrifice their Ghost Quarter to a land to go get it. But on top of that, the Ghost Quarter is still on the board to always blow up my Spreading Seas. You always hit the Ghost Quarter. Always go after the Ghost Quarter. Anyway, I don't hit the Ghost Quarter. But I'm lucky. My opponent doesn't see the line. They take a different line. They Ghost Quarter. So I play the Spreading Seas on this black-white land, and my opponent just Ghost Quarters a different land, keeps the Spreading Seas on the board, and that was pivotal for me to win the game. Game 2, it sucked. I mulliganed to 5. I had to keep a sort of like mediocre, crappy hand. Didn't turn out well. My opponent just mauled me. It wasn't even close. And in game 3, I screwed up all over the place. It was a tight match, but a lot of blunders on my part. There was a point where it was a game about me having a lot of creatures on the battlefield. I did have a Spreading Seas on the battlefield, and I had 1 Lord, and I did have a lot of creatures. But the problem is, if I make an attack and it doesn't kill my opponent swings back for the win. And the thing that makes it complicated is my opponent has Eldrazi Displacer out. Eldrazi Displacer, and so if I make an attack, my opponent can displace a few creatures, get out of range of dying, and then kill me. And I couldn't attack with anything. If I attack with 1 creature, then my opponent just like displaces 2 things on my turn, then they untap, displace 2 more things, attack me for death. So it was this game of me keep passing the turn, and I had 1 good opportunity. I have 3 mana in play, and I have Spreading Seas and a Benthic Biomancer in my hand. And my opponent has that Eldrazi Displacer, and at any point that they can play like Thought Knot Seer and like look at my hand. So I'm like, do you want, if I play I have 3 mana. If I play Benthic Biomancer first, I'm going to get priority again. And my opponent can't blink Thought Knot Seer, for example, and take my Spreading Seas in my hand. So I play Benthic Biomancer, and then I try to play Spreading Seas with 2 mana, but my opponent reminds me, there's a Thalia, Guardian of Thraben in play. I'm like, oh my god. And I need this Spreading Seas to hit this Eldrazi Temple to take away all the colorless mana. And then instead of dealing with like 2 blinks a turn, I only have to deal with 1, and I could surely win. But anyway, I totally screwed that up. There was other screw-ups. My opponent made an attack with 2 Thought-Knot Seers, and I blocked with 4 creatures. The worst block. It was actually the worst block possible. It couldn't have been worse. And I lost 3 creatures in that exchange. I think I killed 1 Thought-Knot Seer, but it wasn't worth it. There were way better blocks. I made the block thinking that I was forcing my opponent to blink my creatures, like blink my Silvergill Adept, blink my Benthic Biomancer, so I could re-adapt it. No, those blinks didn't exist. My opponent just went to damage and they all died. So being out of form punished me very hard. It was unfortunate, but I'm gonna have to settle for just somewhere between 5th and 8th place. I'm happy I made it that far, given my form. So I can't complain. A lot of my opponents that evening were very generous to me. Some missed triggers on their part that I was able to take advantage of. Oh yeah, and I also forgot my Aether Vial trigger on like turn 1. That's what also screwed me in game 3. Like it was bad. It was a bad day. Could not close it out. It was unfortunate, but it's not anything different from like what's been going on in my play testing. Everything's rough. Just super out of form. Got to get back into shape. Got to start exercising. Get that blood, get that oxygen going through my brain, because it's not right now. But the list that I chose to play, it has a lot of lords, not that much interaction. It's more lord heavy because I feel that's what I'm craving right now. I'm craving more power, and in fact I'm also craving like more lords so I can get out of range of like Plague Engineer, which is being seen in a lot of decks. Like even some of those Eldrazi Taxes decks were playing with Plague Engineer. So I think it's very dangerous. It's something I want to respect. Something I want to respect big time. And I just want to close out the games. Like the lords are also good against the Hogak deck because they can't block. Nothing blocks. Carrion Feeder can't block. Bloodghast can't block. Gravecrawler can't block. So let's try to kill your opponent before they can get a Hogak out. And if you also have more lords, even if they start getting a little bit going on with Bridge from Below, so long as your creatures are 3/3s, you can do a lot of blocking and save yourself, like buy yourself a lot of time. So like that was the point of the list. Phantasmal Image helped me a little bit. I was able to vial it in against an Eldrazi Taxes player, copy a Thought-Knot Seer, look at my opponent's hand, take a Flicker Wisp out, and make the game like I would have just died to that Flicker Wisp. It would just attack me in the air for death. So it helped there. I don't know where else Phantasmal Image helped, but it's a nice thing to be able to play something with like a Mutavault and Island mana. Force of Negation was very good. Force of Negation was good to me all day. That was a very, very good card. Sided it out against the Eldrazi Taxes players, but it was very good against Blue-White Control. It was very good against Dredge. It was very good against Affinity. It was very good against Affinity. So that's my tournament report. I hope that inspires people. That Merfolk, it's still a competitive deck. Even when you're playing terribly, it's still good. It's still good. It's still making cheddar for me. I won $100, 100 Canadian dollars store credit. Entry was $25. Had I won, I would win $275, assuming there would be a split, which I probably would not have done. What do you want? What are you doing? Can anyone see this? Oh, you got me tangled. You got me tangled, Chubby Meatball. You're tangling yourself. Oh, how do I get out of this? How do I get out of this? Anyway, well, I'll just cut it off here. So that was my tournament report. Playing with Modern Merfolk at the Fusion 1.5K. See you next time.